The courtroom froze the moment the deaf defendant, Marisol Vega, lifted her hands and signed. "Where's my interpreter?" She scanned the room, searching every face, waiting for anyone, to respond. But no one moved. No one answered, because no one in that courtroom understood her. Judge Frank Caprio looked up. He didn't know sign language, but he knew confusion when he saw it. He turned to the clerk. "Ms. Reyes, where is her interpreter?" Reyes checked the file. Her voice faltered. "Your Honor, the interpreter is listed as unavailable. It says she's in custody." Caprio set his pen down with a deliberate, surgical kind of calm, the kind that meant the entire proceeding had just come to a full stop. "In custody?" he repeated. "The interpreter who is legally required to be here, so this woman can understand her own hearing, is in jail." Reyes swallowed. "Yes, Your Honor. She was arrested last night." Caprio removed his reading glasses, folded them once, and placed them on the bench like he was preparing for war. What was the charge? Reyes read from the screen. Obstruction of a police officer. The room went silent. A different kind of silence, heavy, tense, electric, because everyone knew what that really meant. The interpreter had been arrested for insisting the defendant had her ADA rights, and Caprio wasn't about to let the system bury both of them. The courtroom froze instantly. Every idle movement, every whisper, faded into nothing. Judge Caprio leaned forward with a steadiness that made the air tighten. His voice remained calm and deliberate, yet something more forceful lingered underneath. An interpreter who was responsible for helping a deaf defendant communicate with police had been taken into custody. Ironically, for trying to help that same defendant communicate with police. The situation defied logic, and no one was prepared to explain it. That Marisol's hands moved again, shaping questions none of the officials could answer. The confusion on her face grew heavier with each passing second. Her frustration was visible in every gesture, and the feeling of being cut off from the world around her was unmistakable. Caprio's eyes shifted from her to the audience, then finally to Officer D'Angelo, the bailiff, as if searching for any thread of clarity. Before the next moment unfolds, viewers are reminded to share where they're tuning in from and subscribe to Order in the Court. At the 9 hours 45 minutes and 12 seconds mark that morning, a note had already entered the record. Interpreter unavailable, reason, held in custody. The clerk, Miss Reyes, rose to begin the docket. Her tone was official but tinged with unease. "Case number 2025 CR 4417, she announced. State versus Marisol Vega. 4 counts: failing to follow lawful directions, resisting during the arrest, reckless driving, and missing a scheduled court hearing." Caprio lifted a hand, halting her. The clerk stopped mid-sentence, but he faced Marisol directly, shaping his words slowly, so she could read as much as possible from his lips. "Miss Vega, can you hear me?" Marisol studied his mouth carefully. She shook her head, then signed again, slow, precise motions that carried her growing distress. Caprio scanned the room. "Does anyone here know American Sign Language?" he asked. That silence filled the space, but he turned toward the prosecution. "Does your office have an interpreter available?" The prosecutor hesitated, his posture shrinking a little. "Not immediately, Your Honor." Caprio didn't raise his voice, but the change in his tone felt colder and more exact. "We will not proceed until communication is equal. That is not up for debate." Then he addressed the clerk again. "Pull the report on the interpreter's arrest. I want to know why Naomi Clark is in custody and why she wasn't brought here today." Miss Reyes typed quickly, her eyes moving across the screen as the details appeared. Interpreter Naomi Clark was detained at approximately 8:47 p.m. following a traffic stop involving the defendant. Officer Daniel Kim reports that Ms. Clark refused repeated instructions to step back from the scene. She was charged with obstruction. Caprio's jaw tightened just slightly. "Step back from the scene," he repeated, while she was attempting to interpret for a deaf woman who was being detained. Reyes nodded. Jail log notes. Interpreter held overnight. Reason listed as persistent demands. Caprio opened the file in front of him and read silently for several moments. When he looked up, his disbelief was unmistakable. "Let me clarify this. Miss Vega was stopped by an officer. She is profoundly deaf. She asked for an interpreter. An interpreter arrived. That interpreter attempted to facilitate communication, and the officer responded by arresting her for doing the job she was called to do. The prosecutor rose. "Your Honor, according to the officers," Caprio cut in, his voice low and unwavering. "I'm not focused on the phrasing in the report. I'm focused on what the law requires. And the law requires that a deaf individual receive meaningful access to communication during any interaction with law enforcement. That is not an optional courtesy. That is the Americans with Disabilities Act." He turned to Officer D'Angelo. "Bring Officer Kim into the courtroom immediately." Across the courtroom, Marisol's hands moved again, forming questions with growing urgency. No one could answer her. Her isolation deepened, stretching from the night before into this moment. Caprio watched her carefully, speaking with a gentleness that he knew she could not hear. The notation in the log was stark. Interpreter detained. Reason, persistent requests. Moments later, the courtroom door opened, drawing every eye toward it. Officer Daniel Kim stepped inside, dressed in uniform and carrying a slim notebook against his chest. He looked young, focused, and slightly tense as he approached the witness stand. The clerk administered the oath, and he raised his right hand before sitting down with measured precision. Judge Caprio addressed him with a calm tone that carried a quiet seriousness. "Officer Kim, please explain to the court what occurred on the night of November 3rd. Kim flipped open his notebook, his voice steady and professional as he began. "At approximately 8:21 p.m., I observed a vehicle traveling at 48 miles per hour in a 35-mile zone. I initiated a traffic stop, and the vehicle came to a halt after 2 blocks. He paused briefly, then continued. "I approached the driver's side window, identified myself, and requested her license and registration." He turned another page. The driver did not respond. I repeated the request, louder this time, but she stayed silent. She looked like she was ignoring me. Then she reached toward the glove compartment. I ordered her to stop and show her hands. She didn't comply. I opened the door to secure her, but she pulled away. At that point, I called for backup. Caprio leaned forward by a fraction, just enough to signal deeper scrutiny. "Did the driver speak to you at any point?" "No, Your Honor. Not a word." "Did she make any gestures?" Kim hesitated, shifting in his seat. She moved her hands a lot. "Like gestures. Hand motions." Caprio repeated the phrase with intention. "Hand motions. In what manner?" "I'm not exactly sure. It looked like random movements." "Did it occur to you that she may have been signing, using a recognized form of communication?" A faint color rose in Kim's cheeks. "No, Your Honor. Not at that moment." Caprio kept his tone even. "What happened after that?" Kim continued. "An interpreter arrived. She said someone at the scene had contacted her. She walked up to the vehicle and immediately started doing the same hand movements. I instructed her to step back. She didn't. She told me the driver was deaf and needed interpretation. I told her I needed to complete the stop first. She protested, saying I couldn't question the driver without her help. She repeated it several times. I felt she was interfering with my ability to control the situation, so I placed her under arrest for obstruction. For several long seconds, Caprio said nothing. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter but carried more weight. "Officer, if a person cannot hear your commands, failure to respond is not defiance." Kim lowered his gaze toward the notebook. "I didn't know she was deaf until the interpreter explained it." Caprio pressed on gently but firmly. "And when the interpreter informed you, what step did you take to accommodate that information?" "I told her to step back so I could finish the stop." Kim answered. Caprio continued. "Did you call for an interpreter through official channels, as procedure requires?" "No, Your Honor," Kim admitted. "I thought I could manage the situation by removing the interpreter who was disrupting the process." Caprio remained silent, his expression unreadable, while Kim's explanation settled over the courtroom. The atmosphere shifted, charged, uncomfortable, weighted by the implications of each word that a note from the body-worn camera appeared in the official record. Timestamp 7:18 and 4 seconds p.m. Officer shouting. Driver signing. The footage captured a disconnect between two people, each relying on a language the other could not understand. Caprio shifted his attention toward Miss Reyes. Are there any ADA-related filings in this case record? Reyes opened a thick folder and scanned its contents before reading aloud. Yes, Your Honor. 2 months ago, when Miss Vega received a parking citation, she submitted an ASL interpreter request form. The form was delivered to the court clerk's office, the traffic division, and the prosecutor's office. It included her personal information, her interpreter's contact details, and a written request that all future interactions, whether in court or with law enforcement, include ASL access. Caprio's expression tightened. The meaning was clear. The system had been warned, informed, and reminded, and Averdlis failed to respond. Reyes continued turning through the papers. There are also 3 email messages from the interpreting agency, each asking for confirmation that an interpreter would be provided for any court proceedings or police encounters. None of these emails received a reply. Caprio leaned back in his chair, the weight of the silence landing heavily. None, he repeated quietly. Reyes turned another page. There's also a voicemail transcript from the jail supervisor to the interpreting agency. It was left at 11:03 p.m. on November 3rd. The message states, "We don't compensate interpreters at night. She'll have to write notes." A cold tension moved across the courtroom. Caprio's voice lowered into something controlled and precise. Rights are not items you can remove from a budget. They are not privileges assigned when convenient. He turned to the prosecutor. Does your office have a response to this? The prosecutor rose, looking unsettled. Your Honor, the department is reviewing its procedures. Caprio cut in before he could continue. Reviewing procedures? A woman was effectively punished for being deaf. An interpreter was taken into custody for interpreting, and the system's response is a procedural review. The judge leaned forward, his tone firm but unwavering. If you believe accessibility is a right, not a courtesy, then you understand why this must be addressed immediately. A brief ADA summary line was entered into the record. Interpreters must be provided before questioning begins. Just then, the courtroom door swung open. Naomi Clark entered, accompanied by Officer D'Angelo. She looked worn from the night in jail, clothes crumpled, hair slightly out of place, but her professionalism remained intact. Despite the exhaustion in her posture, her expression stayed steady and composed. Then something unusual happened. Judge Caprio stood. The entire room registered the significance of it. Miss Clark, he said, his voice carrying a rare solemnity. On behalf of this court, I apologize. What happened to you is wrong. What happened to Miss Vega was also wrong. I intend to ensure it never happens again. Naomi's eyes welled with emotion, but she kept her composure and nodded. Caprio gestured toward the witness stand. Please, I need you to interpret, and I also need to hear your account of what occurred. She took her place at the stand, raised her hand for the oath, and then immediately turned to Marisol. Her hands began moving fluidly, quickly, bringing language back into the room. For the first time since the hearing began, Marisol's face changed instantly, relief spreading across her features. Her hands moved with urgency, releasing everything she'd held in since the arrest. Naomi interpreted, her voice clear. She's asking what's happening. She wants to know if she's being taken to jail. She wants to know why no one would communicate with her. Naomi continued, her voice steady despite the strain in it. He told me I was interfering. I told him the ADA requires an interpreter on site. He repeated that if I didn't step back, I would be taken into custody. I explained that I couldn't walk away, because without me she had absolutely no way to understand anything happening around her. Her voice wavered for the first time, and then he arrested me. Judge Caprio shifted his gaze toward Officer Kim. Officer, is that an accurate account? Kim gave a brief nod. Yes, Your Honor. What exactly did you say to Miss Clark when she mentioned ADA requirements? Kim hesitated, tension visible in his posture. I told her that her signing was making the situation harder. The entire courtroom fell silent. 5 seconds passed. Then 7, 10, by 12. The weight of those words had settled like a stone across the room. When Caprio finally spoke, his voice was lower, but sharper. American Sign Language does not create confusion. It is a recognized form of communication. A timestamp appeared in the record. 10 hours, 13 minutes, 48 seconds AM. Court acknowledges systemic failure. Caprio opened the case file once more and read quietly before delivering his findings. The evidence demonstrates the following. Miss Vega is profoundly deaf. She submitted an ADA request form 2 months ago. That form was ignored. She was stopped for a minor traffic matter. She could not hear the officer's commands. She attempted to communicate through sign language, and by reaching for an identification card, her actions were misinterpreted as noncompliance. He continued, his tone firm. An interpreter arrived to provide required communication access. The interpreter was arrested for attempting to fulfill that obligation. Miss Vega then spent the night in custody without any way to communicate. The jail declined to provide an interpreter because the request occurred after standard hours. Caprio closed the folder slowly. Every one of those actions violated the ADA. Every one of those actions violated Miss Vega's constitutional rights. And every one of them is unacceptable. He looked directly at Marisol as Naomi translated. Miss Vega, all charges against you are dismissed. Your arrest record will be cleared. You will receive a formal written apology from this court and from the Providence Police Department. You will also be reimbursed for any interpreter expenses that should have been provided during your stop and your time in custody. Marisol signed a question. Naomi interpreted softly. She wants to know if she did something wrong. Caprio's expression softened. Tell her no. Tell her the system failed her, and that I intend to make sure it does not fail anyone else moving forward. He turned to Officer Kim. Officer, you will complete a 40-hour ADA compliance course. You will also prepare a written report on disability rights as they apply to police procedures. And you will offer a personal apology to both Miss Vega and Miss Clark. Kim answered quietly, Yes, Your Honor. Naomi's voice barely carried across the courtroom as she translated. She says you helped her be heard again. Her words hung gently in the air. Judge Caprio offered a small nod before responding. No, her voice never disappeared. We simply weren't paying attention. The room absorbed the weight of that line, a reminder that justice can speak even when no sound is made. A quiet stillness followed, the type that often settles right before understanding finally arrives. He shifted his attention to the gallery, addressing everyone present. If we believe justice should be within reach for every individual, then we must continue to improve. His tone was steady, carrying the message like a closing statement meant for more than just the people in the room. It was a call to action as much as a reflection on the case that unfolded before them. 3 weeks passed, and the impact of that hearing began to show. The Providence Police Department officially introduced a new disability rights program designed to prevent misunderstandings during public encounters. Every officer completed the training, and Officer Kim was among the earliest to finish. His final written assignment carried a reflective title, The Language I Didn't Know. It addressed both the gaps he had missed and the lessons he wished he had recognized earlier. The newly launched 24-hour interpreter hotline quickly became a crucial resource. Within its first 30 days, it fielded 32 calls. 32 individuals who previously might have faced arrest or confusion during a routine stop were instead given the communication access the law requires. Each call represented a moment where clarity replaced uncertainty, where a barrier fell instead of being reinforced. Naomi Clark's obstruction case was dismissed permanently, leaving no possibility for it to return. The city offered a formal apology acknowledging the error and provided compensation for her time in custody and for the income she lost as a result. For the first time since her arrest, she felt the system acknowledge the harm done, not only with words, but with corrective actions. Yes, for Marisol Vega. Her arrest record was cleared entirely. The police chief personally contacted her to apologize, explaining the changes now being put in place. The mayor also reached out, thanking her for bringing attention to the gaps that had long gone unaddressed. Her experience became a turning point, not just for her, but for the entire city. The court's accommodation forms underwent a complete redesign. They were now offered in video ASL, in large print options, in Braille formats, and in 15 translated languages. Each form submitted triggered an automatic confirmation notice, followed by a direct phone call, to ensure nothing fell through the cracks again. The system was rebuilt to prevent silence from being mistaken for non-cooperation. When the Department of Justice received Judge Caprio's detailed report, they reviewed the case closely. The procedures he outlined were later used as a model for improving ADA practices in municipal courts across the country. What began as a single case became a national reference point for accessibility and fair treatment. On his desk, Judge Caprio kept a small handwritten note card. It read, "Silence is not resistance. It may simply be a language you never learned." He reviewed those words every morning before stepping into the courtroom, a reminder of the responsibility that comes with a bench. It served as both a guide and a promise to listen before acting. And just behind his bench, mounted where every visitor could see it, hung a framed display in American Sign Language. It carried one message: justice for all and everyone. It was simple, quiet, and unmistakably clear, an assurance that no one entering that courtroom would be overlooked again. A final note to viewers: this story is a dramatized piece created for education and awareness. It is not legal guidance, nor is it a factual report. It serves to illustrate the importance of accessibility, understanding, and accountability within public institutions.